Let me tell you how we can solve all this racism problem if we wanted to solve problems. But we don't. You know we don't. When I say we, I mean not everyone. You might want to solve a problem. I might want to solve a problem. But the leadership of groups that are, let's say, active, they don't necessarily want to solve a problem. Because in politics, if you solve the problem, you have to find another job. If you had no politicians, it would be easy to merge these because they are two halves of the whole. Having goals without good systems is useless because you can't get to your goal. Having systems with no aspirations or no end state that you're trying to get to borders on immoral. That's not the intention. I mean, there's nobody on the right who's trying to do anything immoral. Nobody thinks of it that way. But if you have processes that don't have a pretty distinct end state in mind that's better for everybody, if you're not heading towards something good, what are you doing? You have to add these together to have anything. I think that the country will be stronger once we've gotten through all of this. That has less to do with the protests and more to do with just good news, because we shook the box of basically everything. And that kind of energy and disruption in a country full of entrepreneurs should unleash just amazing amounts of progress. Now, let me tell you how we can solve all this racism problem if we wanted to solve problems. But we don't. You know we don't. When I say we, I mean not everyone. You might want to solve a problem. I might want to solve a problem. But the leadership of groups that are, let's say, active, they don't necessarily want to solve a problem. Because in politics, if you solve the problem, you have to find another job. Right? So politicians don't always want to solve problems. Sometimes it benefits them to keep that problem running a little bit. Likewise, the leaders of any kind of provocative groups. So the leadership may be out of sync with the people they're leading who might want solutions. Leadership, it's a little less certain. So, but imagine, if you will, there were no leadership, and all you wanted to do was solve problems. What would that look like? Given that people have very different views of the world, how could you solve it? Here's my take on it. I would say that if you looked at the political left and the political right, that they focus in different places. This part I've told you before, which is the left seems to focus on the end state. They'd like equal justice and equal pay and no bigotry and free healthcare and free college. Now, they also believe that there are systems that need to be in place to get there. But they focus on the end state, right? So the emphasis is on getting to this, more equal, more moral place. I would say the political right also likes all this stuff, but doesn't know how to get it. Instead, they say, we don't know how to get all that stuff. You could talk about it all day long, but nobody knows how to get there in a way that the math works and the country would accept. So instead, the best we can do is have these systems that are equal for everybody, as best we can do it. So you have to tweak these things to make sure they're equal over time. But the Constitution, the laws, and the educational system, the family process, and even mentoring, I'm throwing that in there because that's important. So let's say these are systems. But again, both the left and the right, they both have goals, and they both think that you need a system to get there. It's just a difference in emphasis. There's more emphasis on goals on this side, and more emphasis on process and systems, with less emphasis on the outcomes, because who can guarantee you an outcome? Nobody can guarantee you an outcome, but we can work really hard to make sure that everybody's got the same rules and the same game. So given this situation, how would you solve it? Well, if there were no politics and there were no leaders, it's kind of easy. This would be really easy to solve if there were no political leaders. I mean, really easy, because there's no problem here in the first place. Here's why. The solution is really easy. Number one, you agree on the aspirations. Let's call them goals. Is there anybody on the right who, if it were free, would not want everybody to have health care? If it's free, like it's not free. But imagine if, there were magic. So let's say magic exists. Hey, magic exists. And you go to a Republican. Hey, we just discovered that magic exists, and we can give everybody health care for free. Are you in? Is there any Republican who would say, no, even though it's magic and it's not going to cost me anything, it's not going to cost anybody anything, and there's no downside, I don't want other people to have health care. Said nobody. Said nobody. Right? If it were free, yeah, everybody would be on the same page. So, given that you've got these 2 points of view, I think we could agree on the aspirations. There's no Republican who would not agree if we had a way to get there. We don't, but if we had a way to get there, I'd like all of this stuff. So you could agree on the aspirations, no problem. I think you could get there. You could also agree on the metrics. In other words, what are you measuring to know if you've got a problem, and what are you measuring to know if what you're doing is working? Well, that would be easy. Do you think anybody would disagree on the concept of coming together over what you're measuring to know if it works? No, I think you could get together on that. That's not a problem. Then here's the part that's the heart of it. Making A/B testing more common. Now, A/B testing is literally just testing something small and see if it works. And if it works, you do more of that. And if it doesn't work, you try something else, and then you just keep testing. But it's a continuous testing situation. Why do I like the autonomous zone in Seattle? Because it's a test. It's a test. We're going to learn something about the AutoZone. We don't know what, but we're definitely going to learn something. Now, it's not the kind of A/B testing I'm talking about, because if you do it right, you plan it so it could be more lasting, and you do your best job of planning it. The Seattle Autonomous Zone was not planned, and therefore it doesn't have any structure to support it, so we kind of know where it's going to end up. In the long run, it's going to be dismantled. But we're going to learn a lot, and I think that genuinely it's going to be useful. And then once you've learned something for your testing, you revise your systems. So, suppose we get an idea from this autonomous zone, and somebody says, the biggest problem is you didn't plan it, and also that it belonged to somebody else. That's a pretty big problem. That zone that they've occupied, that belongs to other people. So that's a problem. But suppose somebody said, hey, maybe we just need 2 systems within one country. Would it be a problem for you personally, would you have a problem if somebody said, hey, we found some private funding and we found some land for sale. We'd like to build a little experiment here in the middle of Idaho, or it doesn't matter where. Just find some friendly place. Say, we're going to build this thing. We're going to try an experiment for a few years with private money. And we're going to try no cops. So that's part of the experiment. No police. We're going to try to build a place that's really inexpensive, so you don't have to be a millionaire. And we'll make sure everybody's trained and educated. We'll have some kind of health care. So in other words, we'll just test something, see if it works. Whatever we learn from that will become the next test, or maybe legislation. So, if you had no politicians, it would be easy to merge these, because they are 2 halves of the whole. Having goals without good systems is useless, because you can't get to your goal. Having systems with no aspirations, or no end state that you're trying to get to, borders on immoral. That's not the intention. I mean, there's nobody on the right who's trying to do anything immoral. Nobody thinks of it that way. But if you have processes that don't have a pretty distinct end state in mind that's better for everybody, if you're not heading towards something good, what are you doing? You have to add these together to have anything. So if we didn't have leaders, we would just add those things together. We would agree that we don't know as much as we think we know about anything. So we would just test them. Somebody says, next time communism will work, I tell you, it hasn't ever been tried. So everybody who takes a good idea and then exaggerates it into a stupid one to make a point is really just surrendering. All right? So whoever said that, you just surrendered your point. Because if you have to take a good suggestion and turn it into something stupid just to criticize it, then you've accepted that there wasn't enough to criticize of the idea itself. So I don't believe anybody has suggested communism. I haven't heard that suggestion. I've heard socialism. If you think they're the same, again, same problem. You've surrendered. If you're going to call communism and socialism the same thing, well, you've surrendered. Because if you can't criticize socialism on its own without turning it into some other thing called communism so you can criticize it, well, you've surrendered. You've said there's nothing to criticize with socialism. Otherwise, you would just criticize it. You wouldn't have to turn it into something else. All right. People are giving me examples of other countries that have already tried things. Again, let me say this as clearly as possible. If somebody wanted to try something in just a small community, and it wasn't your money, why would you object? I know you say you don't think the experiment would work if let's say it's too heavily socialist. I hear you. But you also hear that other people think it might, right? So all that I need to convince you is that there are people who have different opinions. That's all. If people have different opinions, and it can be tested, and it doesn't cost you anything, you personally, no risk. Why not? Why not?